Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. Sorry about the short delay in us getting started today. So my name is Kimberly Howard. I'm a project manager with the DFSS Homeless Services Division, and I'm also joined today by Chandra Libby and Carrie Moy from the DFSS team. And today's training is intended for staff who will be participating in the 2021 point-in-time count, specifically the Unsheltered count later this week. In terms of housekeeping, folks are muted just given the sort of volume of attendees today, but please enter any questions in the questions box as we go, and we will hold time to answer those as they come up, as well as have additional time for questions at the end. And also this session will be recorded today, so you can access this later or share this recording with others who will be involved. So goals for today are to walk through the overall approach to the PIC count this year, which will look different within the context of COVID than it has in previous years. Speak to the team assignments and your role in participating in the count this year, as well as walk through the survey itself and answer any questions. So to kick off with the basics of the PIC count. So I imagine many of you have been involved in previous point-in-time counts, but for those of you who are sort of newer to this process, this is an annual exercise that we do in Chicago that's required by HUD. It is an annual snapshot of everyone experiencing homelessness on one night of the year, and we use it to inform service and resource planning, advocate for funds to assist people experiencing homelessness, build public awareness of homelessness, and track trends over time. This year's count is happening this week, so you can see our training is happening right now. Tomorrow is the official date of the count, and so what that means is that everyone in shelter will be counted tomorrow from 7 to 10 p.m. And then the unsheltered count will happen from Wednesday, January 27th to Friday, January 29th. But we will be asking folks about where they spent the night on Tuesday, January 26th. Our approach to the 2021 PIC count had to look different given that we're in a pandemic. And so we wanted to change the approach this year to reduce risk of spread of COVID-19, adjust for limited capacity of service providers in our community and for city agencies, and also reflect updated guidance from HUD. And so key changes that we'll sort of walk through the details of in today's session is that the count will be conducted only by trained staff rather than our sort of typical staff and up to 400 volunteers who would typically participate with us in a count. Rather than covering sort of a full canvas of the city, we will be covering only a sample of areas using methodology that was developed for us by our data partners at the UIC Voorhees Center. Since this will occur over the course of several days, this means we will use a survey-based method. So there will not be a separate tally and survey. It just will be one short survey. The training will happen online on this webinar rather than in person, and we will ask that outreach staff follow all COVID-safe practices while participating in the count, including maintaining distance, wearing masks, providing PPE, and sort of all of the typical actions you're taking to stay safe. So who's involved in the count? The City of Chicago Department of Family and Support Services is the lead on the PIC count each year, but we partner very closely with All Chicago, the University of Illinois Chicago, Voorhees Center, as well as seek input from the Community of Care PIT subcommittee, which includes service providers and people with lived experience of homelessness. Also on the call today, we have partners from Ignite, Howard Brown Health, and Veterans Affairs, who will be helping this year at surveying in sort of specific drop-in locations to count specialized populations, as well as most staff on our outreach teams who will be doing outreach at sample areas across the city and surveying everyone experiencing unsheltered homelessness in those areas. And so outreach teams include the DFSS HOP team, Featherfist, Haymarket, Salvation Army, the Night Ministry, and Threshold. Okay, so I want to start off with a sort of big picture view of what the count looks like this year. And so starting with the sort of overall map of the city that we will be covering. So as I said, we're not doing a full canvas of the city for this year's count, but instead we'll be following a methodology developed by the UIC Voorhees Center. And so that means that in this year's count, we'll be covering sort of selected census tracts. And so on the map, everything that you see in color is what will be covered, and that's split out by outreach teams. These areas include sort of 100% of certainty areas, which are census tracts that were had a high share of the unsheltered population on last year's count. So think of the Loop and CTA stations. We'll also cover 100% of high density areas. And so those are also areas with sort of a high concentration of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the last count, which we would typically refer to as hotspots. So think of the viaducts under the Kennedy Expressway, for example. We'll then be covering 50% of medium density areas. So those are places where we found some folks, but not too many in previous counts. And then 10% of rare areas. And that's census tracts where we found no one last year, but that should be included as part of the sample, just in case there's sort of geographic shifts in the population that we want to not miss. What this will look like from sort of an individual staff perspective, just this is sort of the big picture, and then each agency will have received specific assignments. And so this is really what you'll have on a specific day to go out and cover an area. So this is just an example of a sort of high density area that's been assigned. And so each agency has a packet where there's one page for each of these census tracts, which has a map, boundaries on the north, south, east, and west sides, and teams should be canvassing within these specific areas. We want to note that these are census tracts, so they're not sort of perfectly split areas, and really we'll be relying on outreach teams to sort of use their expertise and local knowledge in identifying where to go within these spots. So as you can see, this location has the Kennedy Expressway running through it. We would envision that most folks to be counted would be sort of along the viaducts there at the exits, and not necessarily sort of equal coverage would not be required across this entire tract. To give another example, this is a example of a rare census tract. So this is an area where no one was counted in last year's count, but that we want to cover just in case. And so you can see the boundaries here again, but for these sort of low or these rare areas, I don't feel obligated to spend too much time here. This is again for a sample. Okay, and so what is your role sort of within these assignments? As an outreach team, you'll be assigned to canvass an area or multiple areas during sort of typical working hours over the course of 3 days. Again, we're sort of asking you all to allocate your time according to your experience with the area and how many individuals you would expect to engage in those locations. So there's no need to sort of continue to cover low traffic areas or places where you've already surveyed everyone you would typically see there. But for places where there's drop-in centers or libraries or McDonald's or sort of other places that you think individuals may cycle through, those may be worth sort of coming back to multiple times. Within these assigned areas, we're asking that you would engage with any individuals appearing to be experiencing homelessness who is willing to be surveyed, and to complete the short online survey as you are speaking with a participant. And we'll go through the survey in a minute. We'll also ask you to provide PPE and giveaways to participants. So all of our agencies have now picked up from DFSS masks and gloves and hand sanitizer, hats, hand warmers, and socks, both for to make sure sort of all staff have appropriate PPE, but also enough to be distributing to participants during the count. And of course, we ask that you follow COVID-safe protocol. For the additional teams, so that's staff from Ignite, Broadway Youth Center, and the VA, who will be covering for veterans and youth in those locations. The role is basically the same, except that instead of sort of canvassing and surveying individuals on the street, we'll ask you to survey any individuals who come inside at your location and are willing to be surveyed. What will you need to participate in the count? So the survey is online this year, which means that you'll need a cell phone, a tablet, or a computer with you on the street to access and complete the online survey. We also will send out a soft copy of the survey so that folks can print out a copy if needed. Also make sure you have appropriate PPE for yourself and giveaways. I'm going to pause here before we launch into the survey just to see if there's questions about sort of the overall assignments or approach to the count this year, or sort of outreach staff roles particularly.
No questions have come in yet, Kim.
Oh, thanks, Carrie.
We just had a question. Should we go inside libraries, drop-in centers, and count people there?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. We are sort of looking for your teams to defer to sort of what practice you're currently following. So understanding that libraries and drop-in centers may have limits on how many folks can go inside. I would be sort of thoughtful about that. On the other hand, if you have relationships with those drop-in centers, feel free to go inside and count folks. Otherwise, I would say, try to catch folks as they're coming in and out of sort of indoor spaces. That was a great question. I'll pause just to see if there's any others that will come through, and then we'll move on to the survey itself.
So we have another question. It says, for clarity, the time frames that we've done in the past have changed from 7 to 10 p.m. Has this changed?
Great question. So I will quickly go back to the calendar of events. So the shelters count is happening on Tuesday night, and that is the count of everyone who is sleeping in a sheltered location on the night of Tuesday, January 26th. That will happen from 7 to 10 p.m. For the unsheltered count, which normally takes place also on the night of, this year we're not having that happen, given that we have less sort of volunteer capacity to do the full canvass of the city on one night. So the unsheltered count will take place from Wednesday the 27th through Friday the 29th. And we're asking that outreach teams sort of factor this into their typical working hours. So if your outreach team sort of typically goes out from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, that's the schedule you will follow. If your team is normally out overnight, that's also the schedule you will follow. And so your supervisor will give sort of more instruction on which assignments you will be covering and over which days.
So far, those are our only two questions.
Great. Okay, so I will move on to the survey. I'm happy to answer more questions as they come in or take questions at the end. So as I mentioned, the survey looks different this year. Typically in a count, we would do sort of both a long survey for folks who are willing to be surveyed, and then just a tally of anyone that volunteers are seeing on the street or who are not willing to be surveyed. Because we're doing a count over the course of several days, that means that we need to actually gather information from each person we're engaging with to count so that we can make sure that we're not sort of duplicating the count. So the link is here, and Carrie, I don't know if you'd be able to share that in the chat as we go, because I think it would be really helpful for folks to click on this link, preview it and test it out, and I'll talk through sort of some of the specific questions right now. But this will be the survey that you will be completing as you interview folks, either on your cell phone or on your tablet or whatever you have with you out on the field. And feel free to submit practice responses as we go today. I will reset the survey at 9 a.m. on Wednesday before the count starts. So don't worry about sort of messing with any of the data if you complete this now. But overall, the goal of the survey is really straightforward this year. It's just to capture, is this person actually experiencing homelessness, and where did they spend the night on January 26th, and some basic demographic information. So we won't be capturing sort of the same level of detail that we have in previous years, knowing that we want to sort of keep interaction short to reduce COVID risk, and we have limited capacity to do the count this year. So I want to call your attention to a couple questions in the survey. So one, since the count will happen over the course of several days, we'd ask that you please pay special attention to questions that will help us identify if someone has already been counted. In other words, things that will help us, once we get all the data in, to deduplicate sort of who we're counting. So the second question will be, have you completed any other surveys regarding homelessness this week? If someone says yes, please thank them for their time and move on to someone else. Questions 5 and 6 will also ask that you record the respondent's initials and date of birth. And that helps us to, even if they say, no, I have not completed any other surveys this week, if we get someone with sort of the same initials and same date of birth, we can know that maybe multiple teams counted this person over the course of the count. Question 4, so as I mentioned, the official night of the count is January 26th. So survey questions, even though we'll be surveying folks from sort of Wednesday to Friday, questions will focus on where the person actually slept on the night of the count on January 26th. So you'll see this on question 4, that asks sort of what category of location the person spent the night. You will then get sort of drop downs depending on what you say here. And as you sort of go further down, you will eventually be asked for the address, cross street, or place of interest where the person actually stayed on January 26th. And that's just sort of as in a normal count year, and we're asking that if you can be as specific as possible with locations. So for example, saying the Damon Blue Line stop, or sort of cross streets to help us actually get the best sense of sort of locations where someone spent the night on January 26th. And then the last question I want to highlight is question 10. Have you ever served in the United States military or been activated into active duty as a member of the National Guard as a reservist? And so if someone says yes to this, that means they're a veteran. Please call the Community Resource and Referral Center at 312-569-5750, which is staffed by Veterans Affairs social workers who can answer questions about resources that they may be eligible for, and to get them connected to housing. So many of you may already know about this resource, but we wanted to highlight that again as part of the PIC count. Okay, I will pause here for questions about the survey. And please, as I talk, feel free to be testing it out.
Yeah, so I did put a link in the chat to the survey, and we do have one question about it already. If we know or can get full names, should we enter full names?
Actually, no. I think just keep just their initials and date of birth, and together with those two things, that's plenty to sort of deduplicate without gathering too much personal information into this data set.
And we have another question. How many questions are there in total?
I think there's roughly, 13 questions, if I remember, although folks who are in it right now could probably correct me if I'm wrong. There are 11, perfect. There are a couple questions where there will be sort of follow-up questions depending on your answer to something. So for example, the main one that will pop up is there's a question about whether there's a partner or any children with the individual at the time, or who are with them, I guess, on the night of Tuesday, January 26th. If yes, I think we don't see this a ton, but if yes, then there's follow-up questions about the demographic information for the individuals that accompanied them. So that will only pop up for you if the individual says yes there. Otherwise, there's fewer questions to respond to.
That is all the questions we have right now.
Okay, so then I will go ahead to move on to sort of the last couple slides here. So there will be a sort of daily check-in and debrief for Wednesday through Friday of this week. So sort of one representative or your supervisor will be calling in to DFSS daily to check in before teams head out for the day, just to give us a sense of sort of who's going out and where they're covering on that map. And then in the afternoon, we will do a daily debrief with all teams that anyone is welcome to join. The conference call number is here. And again, we'll share out these slides following this presentation. And that daily debrief will be to sort of review how the day went, check in on progress, knowing that we're doing things a little differently this year. We'll also review data coming in from the survey to make sure that sort of where folks went is consistent with what data is coming in on our end. And we'll sort of answer any questions that come up and address any issues. And lastly, I wanted to share phone numbers for who to call if it's during the count and you have questions. I think, first of all, feel free to contact your supervisor who can contact us, but also please feel free to contact us directly. So Chandra Libby, the head of the HOP team, this is her number. I'm Kim Howard, and that's my office number, and then Carrie Moy. Any of the three of us can answer questions as they come up or help you find an answer.
Okay. We have a couple questions if you're up for it.
I'm up for it. Perfect.
How will the link be sent to outreach workers?
Yeah, so this is actually the final link, but we will also send this out to sort of all of our leads from each agency who can send this out to sort of all participating staff.
Great. And then we have another question. We complete 3 outreach 3 times a day. Are we checking in all 3 times? And I think she's referring to the AM check-in.
Got it. No, we wouldn't need you to call sort of each time you're heading out, but I think if at the start of the day you can share with us, and this will be sort of a call into Chandra, if you can share with her the sort of big picture of where you're going that day, just so that we have that on record and we can check that against sort of the data that's coming in, just in case there's issues with the survey or folks are having trouble with that.
So we have one more question. Can we refer clients to the FEMA program that pays for clients to stay in hotels?
So I think overall, one thing that to note here is that this is one sort of request we're making of outreach teams this week to complete the survey for the PIT count. But please also feel free to engage in the typical activities you would as an outreach worker. So knowing that if someone has sort of specific questions, or if this is someone you've been working with for a long time, please don't let this stand in the way of sort of your typical engagement with this client. It should really just be sort of hopefully a quick additive to the work that you're already doing.
Thanks, Kim. That's all the questions that have come in so far.
Well, I think that is everything for the sort of quick overview of pick count this year. Again, please reach out to any of us with questions, and we will sort of share this slide deck and resources with everyone who joined us today. For folks whose sort of full staff will be participating, were not able to join today, we'll also share the recorded version of this so that all staff can be ready on Wednesday when the count starts. I will stay on for a couple more minutes just in case there are other questions that come in. But besides that, thank you so much. We're so grateful for your partnership in this sort of annual activity that we know will look very different this year, and so greatly appreciate sort of the flexibility and commitment of folks on the line to do this important work. Okay, with no additional questions coming in, we will call it a day. Thank you again, and please feel free to reach out with any questions.